What's up, y'all? We're back with another graphic breakdown. This one is super sick.
To start out, we have a black box fitted up from the bottom. We have a white layer set to 8% fill. Fill and opacity are not the same thing, but sometimes they kind of can do the same effect depending on what you're using them for. So I took that down to 8%. So it kind of just gives a gradient. You can see this square is like a gradient from lighter to darker. So then I use Mid-Journey to create golden lions, and then I put a blur on them. So that is the original image, and I just cut out the background. I wrote into the prompt white background that would be easy to cut out. So then I put a Gaussian blur on the whole thing to give it that that look of what the eye would actually see, because I have a kind of a point in this frame that's the most in focus. His face is kind of in focus, but the back of him is further and further out of focus, if that makes sense. So I use an exposure layer to darken up the back end of him as well. So basically this point right here is the brightest and the most in focus, and then as you get kind of further back, he gets darker and less in focus. So we have a hue saturation layer, and he's pretty much all gold. So I was able to just use the master slider and then just change the color a little bit. I think I made it a little bit warmer, and then just bump the saturation way up to give it that super poppy gold look. Then we have all gold everything in the background with just a gradient overlay over top of that. Again, I won't say always, but I use gradient overlays a lot because they make things pop. So it's just overlay black to white set to 80%. Then we have another cutout of a golden lion, and did that same thing where I put the Gaussian blur on the back of him. So everything back here is blurry, and this right here is in focus. So this guy's kind of further back, so he's almost not even fully in focus. Even his face is a little bit out of focus and blurry, and this stuff's really blurry back here. Whereas this guy, he's in focus right here. So this is getting back actually close to where his face is, and it's less and less in focus. Let me know in the comments if this is making sense. If it's not, maybe use a camera, take some photos, and you'll know what I'm talking about. So hue saturation, same thing with him. Then I used an AI prompt to make this golden lion throne thing. Thought it turned out pretty well. Again, there's a lot of trial and error with making all this stuff. It doesn't always come out perfect. You have to type in a lot of different things to get it the way you want it. And then I just put an exposure layer on top of that. So I'm just bringing down the exposure and painting in with a soft brush on the layer mask, and did that same hue saturation basically to the chair that I did with them. And you can see this exposure layer. There's the cutout. This exposure layer is kind of just darkening up the areas that might be darker because he's in front of it, or he's sitting on it, or his shoulders in front of it, or the lion is next to it, so it's maybe a little bit darker. So just kind of painting in where that needs to be. He has a puppet warp on him, so that is his original stance. He's basically just squatting on the ground. So had to find a certain photo that was going to fit this. So a lot of time goes into finding photos, or generating images, things like that, and then making sure they're going to work. So then we have that same exposure thing happening here where I'm darkening up all the areas that would kind of be darker because he's sitting on the throne. This is what I'm talking about when I say blend images into things, making areas darker because there are shadows. That just makes him look like he's sitting on the chair more than that. So we have the crown on his head, as you can see, the shadow on his head that's super dark. The reason I did that is for the crown. So that works pretty well. Then I just use a curves layer to get the color of that crown where I wanted it. And then a hue saturation on that as well. Kind of the same thing as the rest of the gold stuff, just matching it. That's what you want to do. You want to match like the color and the lighting of everything before you even go in and put stuff like on top of it, like color lookups and stuff. You want to match it as best you can. So we have these gold bars, and that is like the original image. And then I just removed the background and put a blur on it so that it looks like it's in the foreground. So this is way in the foreground, so it has a lot of blur. This is like closer to him, so it's a little bit less blur. And then this is even closer to the camera, so it has the most blur on it. There's just a Gaussian blur, so that one's on 10, and then you just kind of go down. And that makes it look like he's in focus, and then all this stuff is like out of focus as it gets closer to the camera, and this gets further and further away, it gets more out of focus. It's just a cool effect you can do. So then we use the curves layer, hue saturation to match it as well. I mean, like, look at that. Like, that's pretty close, but you do that to it, and the lighting and the color of it matches the rest of the graphic. That's another thing I'm saying when like I say blend, you know, your graphic together, blend the images together. This is what I'm talking about. So then we have shading up from the bottom that just adds some depth. And then that's just like a black gradient. And then we have our apply image layer. So this is an apply image layer where I didn't do the screen, or where I didn't do the screen to it, or set it to screen. And so I painted that in where I wanted there to be like darker areas. And then we did the apply image effect with the screen on the lighter areas and painted that in. So it kind of just makes some of the lighter areas like pop and look really good. And like gave that a blur as well. And then we have our logo set up down below. Basically just making squares, hitting Alt and holding in between two layers, and it attaches the logo just to that layer. It's a cool effect you can use for stuff like that. And then game week, and that's it for that one. So let me know what you think about this graphic in the comments, or if any of the effects help you, or if you have no idea what I'm talking about on a lot of this stuff, and I can hopefully explain it better in the next one. I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.